Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Gilmore with Noisy Bird Digital Marketing, and you're watching another episode of Wingin' It. If this is your first time watching, the goal of this podcast is that you learn more about the construction side of your business, but you also learn about the business side of your business and feel like you're winging it a little bit less. Today, I'm talking with Jason Butts. He's with Bay Horse Homes, and I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about working through dishonesty, building trust, and ultimately building customers that last a lifetime. So, Jason, really excited to be chatting with you today. Thanks for sitting down and taking the time.
Appreciate you guys having us.
Absolutely. So, Jason, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, how you got started in construction, and a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so just kind of from the beginning, I come from a small town, so you kind of have to figure out how to do things yourself. We grew up in a very rural area, and my dad found the need to create a bigger space for us and my siblings. And so that was the very first structure, and I was about 13 years old, and my dad and I basically built our home. And not basically, we did build our home. And as far as I knew as a kid, he was the all-knowing. He knew everything. And, as you get older, you start to realize that he might have just been winging it himself. But I will give him full credit that he definitely, for somebody that was winging it, he could certainly figure it out.
The house never fell down on you or anything?
No, it's still standing there. So from that point, I finished up high school and I moved over the hill to kind of a resort town, Sun Valley, Idaho, Ketchum. And I started framing houses. I started out as a laborer and slowly worked into a framing kind of role through the summer. And I was setting horses on the weekends for my aunt and framing houses during the week. And that's initially where everything started for myself. Obviously, I went on to college after that, and I didn't necessarily go into business management or construction management. I was in pre-med, and then from there, I got out of college and realized that the athletic training degree that I had received wasn't going to get me very far without going on to additional schooling, and I was pretty ready to get to working. And so I started writing loans, started out, basically I've been real estate focused ever since. I started my company in 2005 with a good friend of mine, Rocco Durazio, who has since passed. But we started out as J-Rock Construction. He had some property in Donley, Idaho, and that's essentially where we started it. And few years later, we went separate ways, and I renamed it to Bay Horse Homes. And I came down to the valley being the Treasure Valley, Boise area. And we made some proposals to some hard money lenders. That was kind of right in the heart of the recession. And we had thankfully gotten out of the spec house that we were doing up in Donley and kind of liquidated a lot of stuff. We were still up and running, but we definitely saw the writing on the wall, fortunately early enough to where we didn't get caught too bad. And we ended up coming to work for a company named Idaho Mutual Trust in the Boise area. And Idaho Mutual Trust was a pretty prominent enterprise in the Boise area that had lent, several $1 million to builder developers in the Boise area that was then going to have to manage those REOs that were soon coming their way. We had given them a proposal 9 months prior, and, admittedly, I was just a young guy, and they didn't really see things the same way that I did as far as the market falling apart. And I was thankful that they didn't see them that way, but then the market did fall apart, and they gave me a call and we came back in. And I think at one point in time, I was managing $40 million worth of REOs for them and was their in-house builder. And Bayhorse Homes was the construction entity, and Idaho Mutual Trust was paying the bills. And we figured out a way to be efficient and productive and sell homes through the recession. So that was a huge success for them, huge success for us. Our primary goal was to be able to keep the company afloat through the recession. About a year later, they had kind of taken my methods and processes and decided to do it themselves. And I went on to be a medical device rep for a while and pursue my college degree. And I just ran the company on the side and just did little projects and kind of kept it somewhat streamlined. And here, not too long ago, I decided to go all in once I had my kids, and I decided that I needed to be more present for them. And we went all in here 2-3 years ago, and ever since then it's been good. It's been a challenge, but we couldn't be more thankful. I write my schedule with my kids. My main goal is to be present for my kids, and my kids are 5 and 8, and I have the fortunate opportunity to pick them up every day at 3, and that's what it's about for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love I mean, multiple parts of your story that I kind of want to ask you about and dive into a little bit. I feel the same way as you do. I get to work from home. I'm blessed to be able to, most days I try to go pick my kids up from school, or, I can make parent teacher conferences. I don't have to ask a boss to to take time off or anything like that. I just build that schedule. So
Yeah.
Definitely worth it in that way when you have a family, for sure.
Oh, 100%. There's nothing better than being able to be there for your kids.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to dive into your story a little bit and ask you about some of the adversities. I mean, it sounds like you started this company in 2005. Within a couple of years, you had a business partner leave. You had the 2008 economic crash. And then right as you're kind of pulling out of that, you get this big, contract, this good relationship. Kind of, you guys are able to help each other through the Idaho Mutual place. Yeah, you guys are helping each other through this recession. And then as you pull out of that, sounds like to the tune of several $1 million, all of a sudden they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to take what you did and, bring it in house essentially and leave you hanging out to dry. So
yeah,
in the course of it, sounds like, 5 or 6 years there, it was like adversity. What, talk to that piece a little bit. Like, what was it like as you're trying to build this company up, you're trying to do it the right way, you're just facing these adversities? Like, where does your mindset go? What did you have to do to get through that? Those kinds of things.
There's a piece of advice that I've received from multiple people, not just from my dad. And I call it the best piece of advice and the worst piece of advice that I've received all in the same hand. And it's, don't worry about the money, go out there and work, do the right thing, work harder than somebody else, the money will come. I would say that that's probably good, solid work ethic advice, but from a financial and a successful growth of a company, especially your own company advice, it's terrible advice. We live in a society that we're, unfortunately, the majority of the folks that I've come across, I don't know if this is society in general, but have utilized me as a stepping stone. And the loyalties within the real estate market, the construction market, they're pretty slim. I will say that that's probably my least favorite part about construction is, you could be having lunch or, having a beer on Cinco de Mayo with your crew. But as soon as, we experienced this right before the recession happened up in the Valley County area. We had a basement dug on a house, and literally shook hands with a concrete contractor for mud showing up the next day, and he was going to be there. And we had trucks show up, and our foundation guy didn't show up. And we couldn't find him. He wouldn't answer his phone. We've got all this mud here. What do you do? And the reality of it is there's a lot of folks that chase the dollar. And yeah, money definitely makes the world go round. But I don't know any other way to say it other than, coming from a small town, I was a lot of handshaking. I was a man of my word, and I expected everybody else to be a man of their word. And money changes people. I think I've used this analogy with you before, but it's like an alcoholic. There's guys that can go to the bar and have a drink with dinner, and then there's guys that can have too many drinks and no dinner, and then end up down the way. Alcohol and money, in my experience with people that I've observed, have a very similar, people can destroy themselves with money.
Yeah.
Or chasing the thought of money. And, we've really just tried to continue to do the right thing. And unfortunately, that has led us to a lot of adversity. Trades, vendors, customers, choosing the right customer, choosing the right vendors and trades that want to be a part of your team, not just for this one project, but for many projects to come and through your warranty process.
Yeah. Well, let's speak to that part a little bit. I know that that's kind of the meat of what we're going to talk about today is the, existing and building trust in an industry that sometimes feels like, man, I'm just pushing a boulder uphill trying to do this. Cause we're in the same boat in a lot of ways. There's so many marketing companies out there that, it's one guy, he's really slick with sales, and then he's got a team in the Philippines or Pakistan or wherever that's fulfilling everything for him. He barely knows anything about marketing. And there's people that get burned by these small marketing companies all the time because they're just slick at doing sales, and for us, with Noisy Bird, we felt like, okay, like there's a way to do this differently. And what it looks like is a team that comes to the meeting every time, we're communicating, we're doing these things that is important to our clients, like just basic business stuff. It feels like communicating, writing a contract, fulfilling what we say we're going to do, those things that, are pretty universal. But like you said, just because it's instilled in you, it's not instilled in everyone. So what do you guys do? What do you do to, stand out in your market and, show people, hey, even if you've had a bad experience in the past, or, what are you doing to change that perception and to change that experience, one client at a time?
Well, I think there's kind of several levels to this question, because we've chosen to take a path of visibility. I think the more visible you are, the more accountable you are. Same thing with the people that we hire. Customers typically, in the custom world, they don't necessarily want to be super visible. They want you to keep their expenses to yourself. But from a business standpoint, as a general contractor, we try to set an example. We try not to go out and badmouth other people. We try not to hoard our money or flaunt it. Our successes are exemplified through what we choose to support within our communities that we do work in. So, for example, we support the youth. I'm all about supporting the youth. I came from from a very small, frugal area. And I didn't have the opportunities that I would like to have had looking back on it. I wouldn't change my upbringing one ounce. However, if I can provide an opportunity for, we sponsor several sporting events. We sponsor kids. We sponsor, sometimes we're very visible sponsors. Sometimes we're very quiet sponsor. And we don't have like this giant surplus of marketing money or sponsorship money to give. But, if there's a kid out there that I want my child to look up to, or I would like for my child to look up to somebody similar to that youth, we're going to take a strong look at supporting them and their dreams. We sponsor a Rimshaw, a brand new talent on the Rimshaw circuit, which is the Rocky Mountain Snowmobile Hill Climb Association. And, it's been this kid's dream to race snowmobiles, and his parents have gotten in full steam, and they homeschool him so he can do this circuit. And, he's working in the summer. He helps his parents, he maintains grades. And so we chose to sponsor him this season for the Rimshaw. Same thing we have another rodeo, a kid that it's his dream to be in the NFR. And, we've given them some sponsorship travel money. And, if there's I think sponsoring passions in the youth is something that is overlooked. And your bigger builders in a community, if they're not on the hockey arena billboard, the bang boards, if they're not out there, then why do you as a community continue to support that entity? Why is that one of the most prosperous entities in your community if they're not supporting your youth? So I guess what I'm getting at is we try to lead by example. We have, if little old Bayhorse Homes can afford to sponsor 2 or 3 kids a season in 2 or 3 different, sectors of sports, then some of these bigger national builders or bigger custom builders certainly can. You see a lot of them out there flaunting their money, but you don't see a lot of them out there supporting the youth. So I think that's one area that we've chosen to become more visible, and customers appreciate that. We get a lot of feedback from the fact that, hey, we didn't know much about you, but we saw that you sponsored the youth, and, we wanted to talk to you more about that. That's kind of where we're at with the sponsorship and the visibility. From a trade standpoint, how do we navigate selecting our trades and encouraging that loyalty? We have we spend more time on the conversation piece of building a team and a family, a Bayhorse family, than I would like to have. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's successful. I still think that I'm doing something wrong, because there's so many bad actors in the marketplace that that is the most challenging thing for us right now, is figuring out how to build that team. We've got our tried and true team, but even then, some of them are starting to become painting contractors or framing contractors, and you're not actually getting the guy that you've worked with for the last 10 or 15 years. You're getting a crew that he has hired to help him grow his business. And we're not totally opposed to that concept, but when quality starts dipping, it becomes a conversation. And
Yeah. And I think with that, one thing that I see within the construction industry is that a lot of times as a GC, you tend to just go for the cheapest bid. And that's where I think a lot of times you get bit in the butt. Like you said, there's no loyalty in that. You're just going with the next fly-by-night person that comes up. And then when the quality control issues pop up, you end up paying for them in the back end anyway.
100%. And that's something that we figured out, pretty quickly in the process. Unfortunately, those mistakes sometimes have to be made in order to learn from them. But yeah, no, we want to have a conversation with the trade, not just see the number.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's even trades that are starting to figure out how to be in the middle and still do lousy work, or still just saving money to move to Florida and not be there when I need them for warranty. Those are the trades that you got to steer clear from. You've got to build a team. You got to build a team, and they've got to be on board with Team Bayhorse, Team GC. They got to be on board with Team GC, and they got to be willing to see things through. And that's probably our biggest headache is we tend to succumb to the trade that's in need, and we're getting better with sifting through the salesmanship and discovering the true quality. Because some of these trades are getting really good at their salesmanship and telling you a story that's believable, and you want to help them out, and so forth, so on. So you kick them a job, and then it just turns into a nightmare. And one job can really upend the progress that we're trying to build from a reputation standpoint and from a quality standpoint. So through the processes or through the mistakes of this, part of our process has turned into, we've always had a subcontractor agreement and a customer agreement, but we've had to change some of those things. Some of the verbiage in there, some of the requirements, you're not just required to have liability insurance, but because liability insurance doesn't cover workmanship. So if you have a flooring installer that goes in there and installs a brand new floor from a very well-known supplier, but you don't have him bonded, his insurance is not going to cover craftsmanship. So if he installs that poorly and it's a $40,000 replace because he installed it poorly, you can go after him and his insurance to come back and reinstall it, but they don't cover craftsmanship. So then that liability lands on the general contractor. And a lot of general contractors just turn the phone off and stop answering the phone. We don't. We honor our warranty program, and I think that's a large reason why we have so many return customers. I also think that's why our margins are smaller. But we're trying to create better margins by having better quality trades.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is, you brought up your warranty work quite a bit. Like what separates you from a lot of your competitors, and the way to stand out in that market is to stand by your work. It's not to turn your phone off. It's not to just ghost the person that calls you. It's to say, hey, the home that I built for you is important to me. It's less important to me than it is to you, but it's almost there. And so I'm going to stand by the work that me and my people put into, getting it right for you. And so if that means, hey, we got to come back, we got to reinstall this floor, or we got to, fix this trim or whatever, we're going to come back and do it.
Certainly. Yeah. We don't want to, I think that's part of the visibility thing. We've created ourselves as this visible company. Now we gotta maintain the reputation. When you're not visible, it's a lot easier to not maintain because, nobody knows who you are. But if people have heard your name and know who you are, the accountability definitely goes up. And, I wish everybody was required to be as visible as we desire to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it speaks to what you're doing, what you're building. And I mean, you've been doing this now full time for 3 years. And so, I mean, the only way to build, to grow is just through that consistency, right? And
Certainly.
so, because, like you said, you've been around since 2005, but really the last 3 years is where you've had that traction, you've had that full-time investment. And so, something that I've learned, we've been in business 4 years and I've been full-time for 2.5. And so kind of in the same boat where it's like, man, that growth feels slow while you're in it, but you look back at, oh, this is where we started and this is where we're at now. Like it is just that, like, hey, we can still take this further. We've still got room to grow. We can do more sponsorships next year. We can do these things, but like it just takes us being consistent, and maybe next year we can take on 2 extra sponsorships or whatever that goal is for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, certainly. I think our goal this year is to clean up some of our contracts, and 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 create more time to take on more projects. We did a lot of projects this last year, a lot of small projects. We're trying to kind of balance that between our full builds, our commercial division, TI work, and our additions and remodels. Obviously, the marketplace dictates, what the customer is looking for right now. And in our area, remodels are a pretty big deal right now, just because new construction is so expensive. We're not looking to get out of any one thing. We're just looking to balance it. Remodels take significantly more work and time, from an admin standpoint and a site super standpoint. A new build from the ground up, specs are a different animal than customs. Even if it's a spec custom, it's a different animal than customs. Customs, you got to deal with the customer. You got to, you're putting a weekly meetings in with the customer, making sure that they're satisfied, and change orders, and change order this and change order that. We try not to do the change order program. We try to make sure that our customers have their selections selected early on enough that they've thought about them for plenty of time by the time that we install them. We don't want to remodel a new custom, because somebody changed their mind. Now, that does happen. Obviously, light fixtures look different in a catalog or a magazine than they do hanging in your brand new home with 22-foot ceilings. Those things do change. It's the big tile selections that really get nightmarish, or move this wall so I can make this, fit better. And, we try to sort those things out early on. But from a balance standpoint and our goals this year, we're really, really trying to build a go-to team for our trades. Now, that I pause there because it's different. You have different trades for full-blown high-end quality custom versus, a spec custom. You might have the same trades, but they're going to start to slightly adjust. But then you get to remodels and additions, and a lot of times you have a totally different trade group. And then location is another thing. If we're doing projects in McCall, Stanley, Chalice, versus in Boise, and are we pulling those trades out of Boise to go to those areas, or do we have a local that's willing to do it in those areas? So that becomes a logistics thing that we are trying to become more efficient with our programs that we're putting in place to do so.
Yeah. So as you're making those decisions, just from an administrative standpoint, how are you like building those relationships? Obviously if they're local, it's a lot easier, but let's say you have a job, 20, 30 miles away or whatever. How are you making that decision and sifting? You talked about seeing through the salesmanship and stuff like that. Like what does your process look like right now to try to understand, hey, is this a good trade partner? Is this somebody that I want to team up with on this project? Like what sorts of things are you looking for? What are some red flags, things like that?
Yeah. So one of our first steps in I guess what you're describing is the vetting process is, a lot of guys, we already know who we're going to go with, but if there's something that falls it doesn't align with somebody's schedule, then all of a sudden I got to vet a new drywall guy, right? So to that, you know, my number one question is are they going to be able to work? I might be able to get along with them great, but is my project manager going to be able to get along with them? And so I try to first have a conversation on the phone with them, talk through, you know, the ins and outs of where they're at, what their schedule looks like, what their quality background is, how long they've been doing it, all the basic stuff. And then I try to meet them on a job site with my project manager. I'm a cleanliness first guy. You could be middle of the row quality, but if your job site is like spick and span clean, I'm going to lean that way. I think cleanliness is a representation of quality, and all too often contractors are very sloppy, very messy, and that's one of the things that I just can't tolerate. It is probably my biggest pet peeve. I know that it's 9 times out of 10 the customer's biggest pet peeve. You know, we're doing little things like vacuuming the wood chips out of the walls after the electrician goes through. You know, a lot of contractors don't do that or require that of their trades. So when we walk onto the job site, that's a big part of it. You know, how clean is it? How well maintained are their tools? Do they take pride in their tools? Do they take pride in their craft? You know, their job site. And I can tell a lot walking on a job site with a trade. And, you know, sometimes it's a bad day and they just had fire after fire after fire and mess after mess after mess. And I get it. You know, construction is messy. But that was one thing that I learned early on when I was working through the trades. There was no excuses for a sloppy job site. And, you know, the owner of our company when I was a kid, you know, it didn't matter if you were doing concrete, framing, drywall, there was no excuses for it. And honestly, if my trade wants help with the cleanliness side of it, just speak up. We'll get more trash cans for you to put the drywall, you know, stuff in, little shavings of drywall. We'll put another dump trailer on the job site out a specific window. So that's the big part of it. You know, the phone calls first. And then we gotta figure out if my project manager and that trade are going to be able to jive, and cleanliness. Those are for sure top 3 steps.
Yeah. And I love especially that you're bringing on the project manager saying, hey, like, you know, is this somebody that you want to work with, that you're willing to work with? I think having that conversation, because, you know, you as the quote unquote boss, it's easy for you to say, oh, this is our trade partner. But it shows a level of leadership to say, look, like, you're the one that's going to be interacting. You're the one, like, I'm going to be holding you accountable for this job site. So you get to have some say in who comes on. And so I think that's a good way to approach it. And I think, like, from a leadership standpoint, it feels like, oh, duh, but it might be something that a lot of people probably aren't looking at or aren't really thinking about. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I just think that, you know, the project manager is a big part of the equation. And if I'm entrusting in a project manager to carry the project, then he needs to be able to trust in the fact that I'm actually going to let him carry the torch on the project. And you know, if he's swimming uphill with who I've selected, then we need to have a conversation. We need to go have lunch. We need to figure out how to get them on the same page, or we need to go a different direction. And, you know, sometimes it's not ideal when you have to shift gears and go a different direction, but ultimately, you know, you've made the commitment to the project manager as the point guy for that project. And, you know, ultimately he needs to be set up for success.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, so, I mean, this has been awesome, Jason. I've loved the conversation. I feel like you've offered some great insights into how to stand out in a field, how to provide honest work, how to stand behind it, those kinds of things. We talked about some of the best / worst advice you've been given, which is, don't chase the money, and sort of the lesson there. But is there any other advice that you've been given from mentors, from podcasts, from anything like that? Like, what was the advice? How did you put it into practice, and what did it do for your business when you did?
There is one other piece of advice that I received from an old girlfriend's dad. And he was a utilities contractor and in multiple states. And I never could, and plus he had a big ranch, and I never understood how he was able to juggle so many hats. And, I weighed pretty heavy on him from time to time on, life advice. And one of those times was, how do you have all this knowledge? How do you know how to do all of these things? And he just looked at me and said, well, I don't. I'm just not so arrogant that I'm not too proud to hire somebody that is smarter than me. And so the basis of it was, it's okay to hire somebody that knows more than you. It's okay to hire somebody that's smarter than you in a field. But when you do that, you have to entrust in them. And when you entrust in them, then you become a student of theirs. And, so for example, I'm not the most tech savvy guy. And some of our headaches over the last year have been on the bookkeeping and the logistics side of it. We had somewhere around 244 W-9s that we had to send out this year. And our bookkeeping process was not as dialed as we thought it was. And that became very challenging in January to get all those W-9s out. So here at the first quarter of this 2026 season, we've made some pretty significant strides to make sure that doesn't happen again. But then you've got certificates of insurance. You've got all these, you've got the subcontractor master agreement, you've got the contractor licensing, and all those things expire at different times for each trade. And if my guy's not licensed, happens to have his insurance lapse while he's doing work on one of my projects that ends up catching fire because he threw some stain rags in a trash can and left them there, not knowing that they might combust, and they burn the project down, but he doesn't have any insurance, that's on me. That's on the GC. And he may have had insurance, but last week it lapsed. So we're putting into place some, I've hired some people that I hope to see good outcomes from. They certainly seem far superior to me in the IT and the AI sector. And we're trying to put a system together that has indicators and cues, and then in turn sends alerts to my email or my admin's email saying, hey, drywall company ABC, their contractor's license expired last week and their insurance is going to expire in a month. We need renewal of that. And by the way, they haven't signed the master subcontractor agreement for 2026. So all of those moving pieces that can burn a general contractor in the end, because here's the thing that people don't realize. Everybody thinks they can be a general contractor. Every project manager, every real estate agent, everybody on this planet thinks that they could probably, not everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a good portion of people think they can be a general contractor, and try to build their own home or do their own remodel. But here's the problem that people are failing to understand is you're not just hiring a general contractor to organize your trades through the process of completion. You're hiring a general contractor as a level of liability. And for example, we had a situation where we finished up a remodel and we were delivering appliances, and we had a different appliance crew doing the install. Now, we're at the very end of the project. So I wasn't on the job site when the appliances delivered. My project manager wasn't on the job site. The appliances delivered. We sent up the install crew. They installed, wasn't on site for that either. It's the tail end of the project. These are kind of little things that typically it's pretty common that somebody might not be there at that exact time, especially when they give you an 8 to 12 window to be there. Customer called, said, "Hey, I have some dents in my $3,000 washer dryer set." Okay. Can you send me some pictures? Send us some pictures. They're not just pop them out with a suction cup type dents. They're creased dents. And so, the customer obviously wants me to contact the appliance shop that delivered them and the installers and figure out who dented them. Well, let's be honest here. Nobody's going to own up to denting them. And they didn't. And guess who ended up paying for it? The general contractor. And that is me. And that is one of those scenarios that had the customer been GCing their own project, they would have had to just lived with those dents, right? They wouldn't have gotten a discount on it. They wouldn't have gotten a new washer dryer. And those sort of things come. And I'm not trying to tell everybody out there to, hire a general contractor just so you can come back on them for tedious little things and put that liability on them. But that is a portion of what you're paying us for. And we carry insurance for major problems. And we're also liable for our tradesmen to carry their insurance, and or bonded. Not all general contractors require their tradesmen to be bonded, but that bond, that assures the craftsmanship side of it. So that's something that a lot of general contractors don't realize. And I do think that, general contractors should start looking into is, if you're just insured and your trades are just insured, that doesn't necessarily cover craftsmanship.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's something I didn't even know. So that's super good information. Well, Jason, this has been awesome. I want to respect your time. You've been very generous with your knowledge. I appreciate you sharing, some of your insights, your expertise, things like that. I know you said you have a build coming up in McCall. That's kind of a cool big job. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a return customer of ours. We've done a couple of remodels for her, and she is dead set on us building her custom, and we're pretty excited about it. It's certainly going to be a showstopper. It's in a very unique location between the golf course and the base of the ski resort at Tamarack up there in Valley County. And, there are some challenges that we'll be addressing with it, being in the wetlands and, a long driveway and those sort of things. But we're excited to head them off. And we've already been, working diligently on the pre-construction side of things to get things lined up and in order for this to kick off. Valley County is a pretty short build season. So we're hoping to be able to get on that ground and get the dirt work and the concrete in sooner than later.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. Where do you guys post updates on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that? Where can people follow to learn to see more about that one?
Yeah, we have a Instagram Bayhorse Homes page. It's synced up with my personal Facebook page. So that's primarily where we will be, posting updates about it.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the link in the description for people to follow, and then it's bayhorsehomes.com, right?
You betcha.
Awesome. I'll put those in the description so people can learn more, follow along with what you're doing. Jason, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I'm excited. I feel like people watching will be feeling like they're winging it a little less. So thanks for offering what you did today.
Well, I appreciate having us on.
Yep, happy to do it. And thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you being here. And next week we'll be here with another business owner teaching you how to wing it just a little less in your business. Until then, we'll talk to you later.